Yep, okay. Welcome to the special meeting for the Toowoomba Regional Council for the 17th of November 2021. This meeting is open to the public and also will be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Portfolio Leader, Councillor Carl, councillors. Welcome back, Councillor Summerfield, who has been unwell. It's good to see you there. The CEO, the General Manager of Planning and Development Group. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guybil and Jarrawa peoples, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. Don't have any apologies or leave of absence. No. So we move straight to item number 3, which is the suspension of standing orders. Can I have someone move that we suspend standing orders? Mayor and Councillor Melissa Taylor. All those in favour? Thank you. So item number 4 is the material change of use impact short-term accommodation located at 11 Dipple Street, Middle Ridge. And Jeff Reid is standing in for Shakita today. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. What we have here today is consideration of a material change of use application for short-term accommodation at 11 Dipple Street, Middle Ridge. The subject site is located in the rural residential zone and is a hatchet-shaped lot of approximately 5,034 square metres with direct access to Dipple Street. The site is well vegetated, as you can see on the aerial image there, with natural vegetation, and contains an existing three-bedroom dwelling located towards the rear of the property and adjacent to the unconstructed section of Rowbotham Street. The site is also affected by the Airport Environs Overlay, Bushfire Hazard Overlay, Environmental Significance Overlay and Landslide Hazard Overlay. The site adjoins other detached dwelling houses to the northeast and southwest, which are also in the rural residential zone. Attachment 2 of your report will provide you some more details on the subject site and the locality. What the applicant is proposing is to reuse the existing dwelling house for short-term accommodation, which will be retained in its current form. There are no increase in GFA or any building or structural modifications proposed to the dwelling. The dwelling house is a single-storey building, as I mentioned, comprising 3 bedrooms, open-plan kitchen, dining and living areas. Substantial established landscaping and vegetation will be retained. No removal of vegetation is proposed. The proposed use will be serviced by the existing crossover from Dipple Street, which is a paved driveway extending all the way to the premises, about 150 metres long, if I remember correctly. 3 car parking spaces are to be made available on site for guests. The development application requires impact assessment and accordingly has undergone public notification. During the notification period, 4 properly made submissions were received. Each of those submissions was opposing the development for various reasons. Issues raised in the submissions relate to potential amenity impacts from noise, rubbish, and an increase in traffic and the potential for cars parking on Dipple Street. In general, the concerns were that the use is not in keeping with the rural residential setting and character of the development site. The issues raised in the submissions have been addressed in the consultation section of the report in front of you. In addressing the assessment benchmarks and the issues raised, it is recommended that conditions can be applied to limit the capacity of the short-term accommodation to 6 persons at any one time, and not to individual group, one solid individual group, not 3 individual groups or etc. Regulate the noise and to using noise complaints criteria regime and complaints management, and providing 3 on-site car parking spaces, which will negate the need for potentially parking in Dipple Street However, there is ample room on site to accommodate more than 3 parking spaces if required. In consideration of those factors and the potential to apply conditions to development, it is considered that the short-term accommodation would have a negligible impact on the amenity of its location, and the proposed short-term accommodation would be very much similar to the current residential use of the premises. The development application was also supported by a bushfire management plan, which demonstrates that the use can be carried out in accordance with the bushfire management overlay code of the planning scheme without the need to remove any vegetation. Overall, the proposed development is considered to comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme, and accordingly it is recommended that the proposed development be approved subject to conditions pursuant to provisions of Section 60 of the Planning Act 2016. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. There's no submitters or applicants here today, so just to let you know, councillors, is there any questions for the officer? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Jeff. Jeff, page 13 of 49 under general advice, the number 1, resubmission of documents requiring amendment. Can you just explain what that means, please?
Which page was that, sorry?
It's 13 of 49, but on your file it's probably... Oh, it doesn't have a number. Oh, yeah? No, it doesn't have a number. It's under general advice, resubmission of documents requiring amendment, number 1.
I believe that was in relation to the bushfire management plan, is that correct, Liz?
It just seemed an unusual request, and I wondered why that was.
Can you repeat that, Councillor McDonald?
So page 13 of 49, it doesn't seem to be a page number on the actual report itself.
And what was it?
But it's under general advice.
Yeah.
So it's under general advice, and just an explanation of what that number 1 means, resubmission of documents requiring amendment.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor, if you go back to, and sorry, we're not looking at on board books, so we can't reference your page numbers, but if you go back to the recommendation, condition 8 refers to documents that the development is required to be carried out in accordance with. And for example, you'll see, if you look at even the first document, which is the noise complaints management procedure, there's an amendment required to that document to include, as you can see, a requirement that once they receive a noise complaint, they investigate it. So it's a standard requirement that if there's amendments required to documents, then they need to resubmit those documents to council for endorsement, hence the reference in the general advices section.
Okay, no, that explains. So it's only that one element that needs amendment by the looks of it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, Jeff.
Councillor Antonio?
I may have missed something, but under recommendation, approved use, point 1, rooms cannot be let individually. What's that mean? Is that
Basically
that's an unusual, I don't know whether I've missed something, but that seems a bit unusual to me.
It's a standard condition that's applied to short-term accommodations in this particular instance, such as bed and breakfast. Basically, it means that the premises needs to be let to an individual group. You cannot have 3 unrelated groups occupying each individual bedroom.
Righto. Okay.
Councillor Bonham?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So there's going to be 3 extra car parks made, but no removal of vegetation. And I couldn't see on any of those, on any of the diagrams, where the extra car spaces are actually proposed. There's 2 carport and space for 2, and then underneath, not in position. So I'm confused about the 3 extra, where they're going.
I actually don't have a site plan with me, sorry. They would be utilising the existing carport and the hardstand area that would be immediately adjacent to the front of the carport.
Sorry, you'll have to just say that again. I couldn't hear
They would
you.
be utilising the existing carport for 2 spaces
Yep.
and the hardstand area or the driveway area in front of that existing carport.
Okay. All right, so that's what we classify as extra car parks.
It requires 3 car parks. It actually only requires 2 under the planning code, under the planning scheme, but they are proposing 3.
Okay, and just the cars parked in front of the carport, that does the trick? Okay.
Like stacked parking, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So Jeff, or I'm not sure whether I should direct this to you. So just to be clear, all applications for short-term accommodation, or so all Airbnbs effectively, are impact accessible?
Not all, but
Oh.
a majority.
Can you just explain that to me?
Depends on the zone in which they are in.
Okay, right, yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? This is rural residential.
This is rural
Yeah,
residential,
yeah.
yes.
Councillor Summerfield?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I guess the question I've got is around noise, and that is, do we feel we're comfortable in the way we've stitched up the noise, if I could put it in that phrase, to ensure that it is dealt with? There is an indication that the owner, and it was only an indication, they didn't confirm it, that the owner lived 4 hours away. Is there enough within the application to ensure that that is dealt with appropriately? Because I imagine that's the significant impact really that could actually come out of it if that was the case, because it's such a quiet area, but it's also on large blocks of land, so, and with a lot of trees around. So, but I did wonder whether that's enough that's in there in relation to dealing with noise. Sorry, I went about that the long way, but I'm trying to get back in the saddle.
Councillor, I indicated earlier that there's a required amendment to the noise complaints procedure, that if there is a complaint received by the owner, that they're required to investigate immediately and within a maximum period of 24 hours. In the norm with noise complaints, as you know, if it's basically sort of outside of the daytime, so, 2 o'clock in the morning, then generally, it would be probably also referred to the police, who would also then perhaps attend at the site to deal with, as they would in any sort of residential situation if there's a noise complaint. But there is an additional requirement to amend that noise complaints management procedure for there to be an immediate investigation by the owner.
Councillor O'Shea?
Sorry, thanks, Madam Chair. I suppose my question with this is, and we talk about amenity is the big thing that we're sort of trying to maintain, obviously, for those properties around it. Essentially, the conditions that we've placed on this are stronger than if a normal family of 6 people moved into it, correct?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Carroll Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering what the standard of Dipple Street is, and the fact that we're putting, I mean, there could be someone or a family living there, but the fact is if you're in a short-term accommodation, the car movements could be greater. And I'm just wondering what the standard of Dipple Street is and what the extra movements might do to it. Doesn't look like it's what is Dipple Street classed as in our assessment of streets?
It's regarded as a local road built to somewhat of an urban standard. It doesn't have curb and gutter. It's built.
Got 2 lanes?
Yes, 2 lanes.
A seal with 2.
It's sealed with
Thank you.
with 2 lanes. Yes, I think the pavement width is about 6 metres.
Councillor Bonham?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I meant to ask this earlier. In one of the submissions, one of the submitters says that there's cited conflicts with the planning scheme that include the strategic framework, community identity and diversity, and they say a breakdown of the tight-knit local sense of community through introduction of highly transient persons with no connection to the local area. And then I've read the comments made from council officers in the other column, but I just don't really, I can't appreciate the connection between what the officers' comments are and the submitters' comments. Could we talk a little bit about that, please? The idea that the strategic framework has not been tightly adhered to because of this idea that there's a breakdown in the community through an introduction of highly transient persons with no connection to the local area. It's on page 46 or 49 on board books, Wendy, and I don't know, third or fourth last page on of the report.
So what's our response
ground
to
one.
the issue
Yep.
that the idea raised that it's transient people coming into a neighbourhood?
Just bear with me a sec, I'm just reading it myself, catching up a bit.
Yeah, just there, Wendy. Thank you.
If you want to, I'm just trying to catch up with.
Councillor, yes, the strategic framework does refer to community identity and diversity, which is talking about, you know, having a diverse community, a range of, I guess, family types, residential types. The submitter has referred to the fact of a concern of the breakdown of a tight-knit local sense of community through introduction of highly transient purposes. So that's a statement from the submitter. That's not what the strategic framework reflects. However, I guess you've got to weigh up holistically whether one short-term accommodation facility within a wider community would really be regarded as, you know, destroying the social fabric of a community. I guess, you know, one or two short-term accommodations in a wider community, I guess from my perspective, wouldn't result in a breakdown of the social fabric of a community.
A subsequent question, if I might. Thank you, through to Danielle. Thank you. And our strategic framework under that dot point about the community identity and diversity, do we articulate more on that point, or is it deliberately subjective? What does it say?
Oh, look, I unfortunately don't have the scheme in front of me, so I can't say precisely what that provision says, but it would be at a strategic level, but unfortunately I don't have the scheme in front of me, so I can't say exactly what it states.
I guess I ask because that might be, you know, your subjective interpretation of it. They have had another one. Do we leave it at a strategic level so that there can be various interpretation? Because, you know, they're two very different things: community identity and diversity. And the comments from the submitter seem to speak to that community identity part of the strategic framework.
Can I point to a comment the officer has made in their report where they are undertaking an assessment of the strategic framework, and there's actually a comment in relation to the community identity and diversity theme, and they basically state the proposed short-term accommodation would provide accommodation for visitors of Toowoomba region at a scale similar to a dwelling house use and is considered to be consistent with the community identity and diversity land use theme, specifically with element 3.5.5 sub 2 of the community identity and diversity land use pattern, which provides a variety of short-term and long-term accommodation facilities, example hotels, motels, are available for interstate and international tourism. So it's actually contemplating the provision of accommodation facilities.
Thank you.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I go back to the road and the standard of Dipple Street, and I guess my concerns and my comments would be around the fact that if you lived in that area, you would understand. You've got a long access handle, there's a lot of vegetation there. If you had people who weren't used to driving in such conditions, the road, you would have to take one wheel off if you're passing another car. And, you know, I think that's the context where the people that don't live in the area, I think that could be an issue. I'm not sure, but I think it could be an issue with traffic and road safety. But just looking at that, you can see on page 39 of 49 how much vegetation's there. There's a line access handle, and I'm not sure what the visibility is each way. Now, you could say that it's safe for people there and that somebody could live there with 3 adult children with 3 cars, and that would be correct. You could say that, but they live there, so they actually know how, you know, what the condition is, and that the odds of meeting another car may be nothing, but then, you know, you may have someone coming out of there and speeding and whatever else. So I'm just wondering, are we confident that should there be a stop sign at the end of that driveway or what? Because I believe there probably should be.
I think councillors, we've got to have a certain faith that members of the public are going to drive based on the conditions. There's probably a myriad of places, for example, go up to the Bunya Mountains, and if you've ever been up to the Bunya Mountains, which is predominantly short-term accommodation, the roads probably in some places, if you're going up to the mountain, certainly aren't as developed as this, and there's a lot of little obscure driveways and people seem to manage that. I think we've just got to manage that risk and have some faith that hopefully in 99.9% of the cases, you know, people coming to stay are going to drive to the conditions.
That's why we have such a high road toll, because they don't.
Councillor Carl, did you have a question?
No, thanks, Chair. The officer unpacked more than adequately what I was going to try and address anyway around the strategic framework.
If there's no further, thank you. If there are no further questions, can I have someone move that we reinstate standing orders? Councillor Taylor, Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? Could I have someone move the recommendation that council approve application for a development permit for material change of use impact short-term accommodation pursuant to the provisions of section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 and subject to the conditions listed below? Councillor Carl, Councillor McMahon, anyone want to go into debate? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 223.